Hello and welcome to Jedediah's Corner. It is March 25th. The time in the east coast of America is 11:21. If you watch the UN Security Council hearings, or if you watch the ICJ hearings, and then watched all the General Assembly hearings, and then are now watching the Security Council hearings today, you will find something quite shocking. Well, maybe not too shocking, honestly, to most people who are following this topic. Watch carefully, though. The countries that are most heavily influenced by the Israel lobby, the UK, Britain, and the United States, their language and their rhetoric when they approach this issue is duplicitous. It's confusing. It is intentional. So you have everyone walking in lockstep, repeating the exact same talking points. And then you look at other countries, 55 other countries, all of them. As they speak, what do? They speak directly, and they lay out the facts clearly. They speak with a moral conscience, at least as much as they could muster up, because some of these countries have their own issues. But especially today, I was recently, or just now, listening to China speak. China isn't the best country in the world either. But if you compare China to the United States and just look at their foreign interventions or non-interventions, you could see a huge difference. There's a big gulf between us and China. The US likes to push that China is this pariah. China is this terrible country because they're trying to take Taiwan. I've met some Taiwanese people. I've actually put this question to them in the past. None of them have ever said that they had an issue with Chinese people or that they know of a problem currently in the modern world with people in Taiwan if that they have an issue with China. The United States, though, always involved in regime change operations against countries they don't like, is always going to push lies and smears against the countries that they don't like. Now, most states, most countries have committed and do commit horrible and terrible crimes against humanity on a daily basis. They are primarily oligarchies in the world we live in today because there's been no cap, no control on how much money a person can make, even if they can never spend it. Ever in their entire lives. There's no issue with anyone hoarding money. There's never any redistribution. That's always called socialism or capitalism. So you have oligarchs for a very long time. I mean, look at Walter Rothschild, the person who moved 100,000 immigrants into Israel. That couldn't have been done without his $30 million. $30 million in the early 1900s is a lot of money. So Israel has always had very wealthy backers, and they have allied themselves with the Western countries of this world who crush the global South, keep them weak and underneath of their boot. And now we're warring with the other world powers because for so long we've enjoyed this bipolar or unipolar world after World War II. But the U.S. has slowly chipped away at its own legitimacy with all of these regime change operations, with all of these illegal wars. And they have no moral credibility whatsoever. Neither does Israel, although Israel was more careful about carefully hiding, covering up, and then coming up with rhetoric and lies to plaster over their past. And that was ripped open on October 8th, October 9th, October 10th, when we saw Israel do something that no other country does in war ever. Countries don't automatically start targeting the civilian population of a country that attacked them. Even during a declared war against another country with an army, that doesn't happen. The war with Ukraine and Russia, where two armies are fighting each other and the US is sending weapons to Ukraine, so that as a proxy war against Russia, refusing to negotiate. Negotiation seems to be a thing of the past completely. Except for the countries that are not allowed to speak in the world stage, like Vladimir Putin of Russia, who is a horrible person, I'm sure of that. But at the same time, compare even Russia and their foreign policy to the United States or to Israel. Compare China and their foreign policy to the United States and Israel. Who is more bloodthirsty? Who is taking more human lives, innocent lives? Who's dropping more drone bombs on funerals and digging up graves, defiling corpses? Shortly after Israel started their bombing campaign, believe it was in the middle of October, it may have been in December. The Hilltop Boys, who you may know from some old documentaries about Palestine, initially they were just these little kids talking about invading the Transjordan settlers, people living illegally on Palestinian land. They must have grown up since I last heard of them, because they took a man, beat him, stripped him naked, and inserted things in places where they should not be inserted. Now that is rape. So we have a confirmed case of rape because we know his name, we have pictures of the incident, and we have news stories written about it that were not immediately debunked. This is the new line, and it's frightening. And what I was saying in the beginning, if I didn't complete my point, the difference between AIPAC or just Israel Law, because AIPAC is just one organization, there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of organizations in the UK and in the US that all serve one purpose: to cover with lies the crimes of Israel. Now, what the United States government officials are trying to push, this is where it gets scary. They're trying to push that we are all pro-Hamas and by association, guilty by association, that we're all domestic terrorists if we are pro-Palestine. So we got to be very careful. Be careful. Because they tried lying about mass rapes and beheadings and burnings, and they're still doing it, but they're not pushing that as hard because they know people aren't buying it. Initially, they just tried, we're just going to do whatever we want and no one's going to care, because that's how it usually works. Look at Operation Protective Edge. I think about 13 people in Israel were killed, and they killed 2,000 people in Gaza, and they bombed similarly to how they bombed today, but they just bombed for a short period of time. Now they've destroyed about 70% of civilians, or 70% of Gaza's civilian infrastructure. That's homes, schools, residential buildings, universities, mosques, churches. There's no justification to destroy all those things. The only reason you would go and destroy all those things is, one, you want to ethnically cleanse the population, which we know Israel has attempted to do multiple times. They did do it initially in the Nakba. Or you're trying to make sure that if someone is hurt in these bombs, because we know about 70,000 people were injured, that they can't go seek medical attention. So they've engineered a starvation on a population of 1.5 or 1.8 million people. And they are holding them in a concentration camp, which is a death camp, because they are now, you see it even more obvious than before, they are targeting and assassinating innocent civilians, and we have the videos. We had to wait when the U.S. invaded Iraq. We had to wait for Brittany Griner to give this information, or was it Brittany Griner? Well, we had to wait for Julian Assange to be passed classified information that showed us the United States was committing war crimes. They were torturing people. They were going into civilian homes and killing people. They were robbing civilian homes. And we had this video, this grainy image of a helicopter shooting down innocent civilians. And that was a big deal for the whole world. Fast forward to 2024. What happened to us? I saw a video a couple of days ago that wasn't leaked. It wasn't something that was classified. But it was much more explicit and horrific than the gun copters in Iraq that shot down those civilians. So we are seeing them not even try to hide anymore that they're committing war crimes. It's a terrible trend. It's very frightening. Don't give them any ammunition to call you a domestic terrorist. We are pro-Palestine. That can be said in alone and by itself, and it doesn't mean that I'm anti anything. It means I am pro something. Just be careful, brothers and sisters. They're so close to creating conditions that are just so horrific and so murderous that the death counts are going to rise in a dramatic fashion, and it will be very difficult to pull them down, because when disease starts to spread through a population that firmly packed together, it's not 10,000 people dying every couple of weeks, it's hundreds of thousands of people a day. I hope the U.S. does not aid this genocide again today.